Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Chapter 9. The Writing on the Wall. What's going on here? What's going on? Attracted to no doubt by Malfoy's shout, Argus Filch came shouldering his way through the crowd. Then he saw Mrs. Norris and fell back, clutching his face in horror. My cat! My cat! What happened to Mrs. Norris? He shrieked, and his popping eyes fell on Harry. You! He screeched. You've murdered my cat. You killed her. I'll kill you. Argus. Dumbledore had arrived on the scene, followed by a number of other teachers. In a second, he had swept past Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and detached Mrs. Norris from torture bracket. Come with me, Argus, he said to Filch. You too, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, and Miss Granger. Lockhart stepped forward eagerly. My office is nearest, headmaster, just upstairs. Please feel free. Thank you, Gilderoy, said Dumbledore. The silent crowd parted to let them pass. Lockhart, looking excited and important, hurried after Dumbledore. So did Professor McGonagall and Snape. As they entered Lockhart's darkened office, there was a flurry of movement across the wall. Harry saw several of Lockhart in the picture dodging out of sight. Their hair in rollers. The real Lockhart lit the candle on his desk and stood back. Dumbledore laid Mrs. Norris on the polished surface and began to examine her. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged tense look and sank into a chair outside the pool of candlelight, watching. The tip of Dumbledore's long, crooked nose was barely an inch from Mrs. Norris' fur. He was looking at her closely through his half-moon spectacle, his long finger gently prodding and poking. Professor McGonagall was bent almost as close. Her eyes narrowed. Snape loomed behind them, half in shadow, wearing a most peculiar expression. It was as though he was trying hard not to smile, and Lockhart was hovering around all of them, making suggestions. It was definitely a curse that killed her, probably the transmorgent torture. I've seen it used many times. So unluckily, I wasn't there. I know the very counter curse that would have saved her. Lockhart comments were punctuated by Filch's dry, racking sob. He was slumped in a chair by the desk, unable to look at Mrs. Norris, his face in his hand. Much as he detested Filch, Harry couldn't help feeling a bit sorry for him, though not nearly as sorry as he felt for himself. If Dumbledore believed Filch, he would be expelled for sure. Dumbledore was now muttering a strange word under his breath and tapping Mrs. Norris with his wand, but nothing happened. She continued to look as though she had been recently stuffed. I remember something very similar happening in the Odges, said Lockhart, a series of attacks, the full story in my autobiography. I was able to provide the town folk with various almonds which cleared the matter up at once. The photograph of Lockhart on the wall were nodding, all in agreement. As he talked, one of them had forgotten to remove his hairnet. At last, Dumbledore straightened up. She's not dead, Argus, he said softly. Lockhart stopped abruptly in the middle of counting the number of murders he had prevented. Not dead? Choked Filch, looking through his finger at Mrs. Norris. But why is she so stiff and frozen? She's been petrified, said Dumbledore. Ah, I thought so, said Lockhart, but now I cannot say. Ask him, shrieked Filch, turning his blush and tear-stained face to Harry. No second years could have done this, said Dumbledore firmly. It would take dark magic of the most advanced. He did it! He did it! He did it! Filch spat, his pouty face purpling. You saw what he wrote on the wall. He found it in my office. He'd know I'm a face work horribly. I'm a squib, he finished. I never touched Mrs. Norris, Harry said loudly, uncomfortably uncomfortably aware of everyone looking at him. Including all the lockers on the wall, and I don't even know what a squib is. Rubbish, snarled Fitch. You saw my quiz-spell letter. If I might speak, headmaster, said Snape from the shadow, and her sense of foreboding increased. He was sure nothing Snape had to say was going to do him any good. Porter and his friend may have simply been in the wrong place at wrong time, he said, a slight sneer curling his mouth. As though he doubted, but we do have a set of suspicious. We have to have a set of suspicious circumstances here. Why were they in the upstairs court at all? Why weren't they all at the Halloween feast? Harry, Ron, and Hermione all launched into explanation about the Death Day party. There were hundreds of ghosts. They'll tell you we were there, but why not join the feast afterward? Said Snape, his black eyes glittering as candlelight. Why go up to that corridor? Ron and Hermione looked at Harry. Because, said Harry. Harry said, his heart thumping very fast. Something told him it would sound very far-fetched if he told that he could lead them by the bodies. Bodiless voiced no one, but he could hear, because we were tired and wanted to go to bed, he said. Without any supper? Said Snape, a chump smile flickering across his gaunt face. I didn't think ghosts provided food fit for living people at their parties. We weren't hungry, said Ron loudly, as his stomach gave a huge rumble. Snape's nasty smile widened. I suggested to headmaster that Porter's not being entirely truthful, he said. It might be a good idea if you were deprived of certain privilege until he's ready to tell us the whole story. I personally feel that he should have taken off the Quidditch Gryffindor, the Gryffindor Quidditch team. Until he's ready to be honest. Really, Severus, said Professor McGonagall sharply. I see no reason to stop the boy playing Quidditch. This cat wasn't hit over with the head of the broomstick. There's no evidence at all that Porter had done anything wrong. Dumbledore was giving Harry a searching look. His twinkling light blue gaze made Harry feel as though he was being x-rayed. Innocent until proven guilty, Severus, he said firmly. Snape looked furious. So did Filch. My cat had been petrified, he shrieked, his eyes popping. I want to see some punishment. We'll be able to cure her, Argus, said Dumbledore patiently. Professor Sprout recently managed to produce some mandrake. As soon as they have reached their full size, I'll have a potion made which will revive Mrs. Norris. I'll make it, Lockhart butted in. I must have done it 100 times. I could whip a mandrake restoring draught in my sleep. Excuse me, said Snape icily, but I believe I'm the potion master at the school. There's a very awkward pause. You may go, Dumbledore said to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. They went as quickly as they could without actually running. When they were floored up from Lockhart office, they turned into an empty classroom and closed the door quietly behind them. Harry squinted at his friend Darkness' faces. Do you think I should have told them about the voice I heard? No, said Ron without hesitation. Hearing a voice no one else can hear isn't a good sign. Even in the wizarding world. Something in Ron's voice made Harry ask, You do believe me, don't you? Of course I do, said Ron quickly, but you must admit it's weird. I know it's weird. The whole thing's weird. What was writing on the wall about? The chamber has been open What's that supposed to mean? You know, it's ringing a sort of bell, said Ron slowly. I think someone told me a story about a secret chamber at Hogwarts once. Might have been Bill. And what on earth is squib? Said Harry. To his surprise, Ron stifled a snigger. Well, it's not funny, really, but it's Filch, he said. A squib is someone who's born in a wizarding family, but hasn't got any magic power. Kind of the opposite of muggle-born wizard. But squibs are quite unusual. If Filch trying to learn magic from a quiz spell course, I reckon he must be a squib. It would explain a lot, like why he hates students so much. Ron gave a satisfied smile. He's bitter. A clock chimed somewhere. Midnight, said Harry. We'd better get to bed before Snape came along and tried to frame him for something else. For a few days, the school could talk a little, but the attack on Mrs. Norris. Filch keep it fresh in everyone's mind by pacing the spot where she'd been attacked, as though he thought the attacker might come back. He had seen him scrubbing the message on the wall with Mrs. Scour all-purpose magical mess remover. But to no effect. The word still gleamed as brightly as ever on the stone. When Filch was guarding the stone, of the crime, he was sulking red eyes through the corridors, lunging out a suspicious, unsuspecting student and trying to put them in detention for something like breathing loudly and looking happy. Ginny Weasley seemed very disturbed by Mrs. Norris' fate. According to Ron, she was a great cat lover. But you haven't really got to know Mrs. Norris, Ron told her bracingly. Honestly, we're much better off without her. Ginny's lips trembled. Stuff like this doesn't often happen at Hogwarts, Ron assured her. They'll catch a nutter who did it and have him out of here in no time. I just hope he's got time to petrify Filch before he's expelled. I'm only joking, Ron added hastily as Ginny blenched. The attack had also had an effect on Hermione. It was quite unusual. It was quite usual for Hermione to spend a lot of time reading, but she was now doing almost nothing else. Nor could Harry and Ron get much response from her when they asked what she was up to. Not until the following Wednesday did they find out. Harry had been held back in potion where Snape had made him stay inside behind a scraped up worm off the desk. After a hurried lunch, he went upstairs to meet Ron in the library and saw Justin Filch Fletchy, the Hufflepuff boy from herbology, coming toward him. Harry had just opened his mouth to say hello when Justin caught sight of him, turned abruptly, and sped off in the opposite direction. Harry found Ron at the back of the library, measuring his history of magical homework. Professor Bennett asked him a 3-foot-long composition on the medical example of European wizard. I don't believe it. I'm still 8 inches short, said Ron fiercely, letting go of his parchment, which sprang back into a roll, and Hermione done 4 feet and 7 inches, and her writing tinies. Where is she? Asked Harry, grabbing the tape measure and unrolling his own homework. Somewhere over there, said Ron, trying to open along the shelf. Wait a minute. I think she's trying to read the whole library before Christmas. Harry told Ron about Justin Filch Fletchy running away from him. Don't know why you care. I thought he was a bit of an idiot, said Ron, scribbling away, making his writing as large as possible. All that rubbish about Lockhart being so great. Hermione emerged from between the bookshelf. She looked irritably and last seen ready to talk them. All the copies of Hogwarts history have been taken out, she said, sitting down next to Harry and Ron. And there's 2 week waiting list. I wish I hadn't left my copy at home, but I couldn't fit them into my trunk with a lockered book. Why'd you want it? Said Harry. The same reason everyone else wanted, said Hermione. To read up on Legend of the Chamber of Secret. What's that? Said her quickly. That's just it. I can't remember, said Hermione, biting her lips, and I can't find the story anywhere else. Hermione, let me read your composition, said Ron, desperately checking his watch. No, I won't, said Hermione, suddenly serving. You've had 10 days to finish it. I only need another 2 inch. Go on. The bell rang. Ron and Hermione led the way of history of magic bickering. History of magic was the dullest subject on the timetable. Professor Ben, who's taught it, was the only ghost teacher, and the most exciting thing that ever happened in the class was his entering the room through the blackboard, ancient and shriveled. Many people said he had noticed he was dead. He had simply got up to teach one day and left his body behind him in an armchair in front of a staff room fire. His routine had not varied in the slightest since. Today was as boring as ever. Professor Ben opened his note and began to read in a flat drone like an old vacuum cleaner until nearly everyone in the class was in a deep stupor, occasionally coming around long enough to copy down name or date, then falling asleep again. He had been speaking for half an hour when something happened that had never happened before. Hermione put up her hands. Professor Ben, glancing out the middle of the deadly dull lecture of International Wordlock Convention of 1289, looked amazed. Miss Granger, Professor, I was wondering if you could tell us anything about the Chamber of Secret, said Hermione in a clearer voice. Dean Thomas, who's been sitting with his mouth hanging open, gazing out the window, jerked out of his trance. Lavender Brown head came up off her arm, and yellow elbow slipped off his desk. Professor Ben blinked. My subject is history of magic, he said in his dry, wheezy voice. I deal with fact, Miss Granger, not myth and legend. He cleared his throat and the small noise like a chalk snapping and continued. In September of that year, a computer started soul cruiser. He sputtered tall. He started to halt. Hermione's hand was waving in the air again. Miss Grant? Please, sir, don't legend always have a basis in fact? Professor Ben was looking at her in such amazement. Harry was sure no student had ever interrupted him before, alive or dead. Well, said Professor Ben slowly, yes, one could agree that. I suppose, he purred at Hermione as though he had never seen a student properly before. However, the legend of which you speak of is such a very essential, even Lucius tale. But the whole class was now hanging on Professor Ben every word. He looked dimly at them. Every face turned to his. Harry could tell he was completely thrown by such an unusual show of interest. Oh, very well, he said slowly. Let me see. The Chamber of Secret. You all know, of course, that Hogwarts was founded over 1,000 of years ago. The precise date is uncertain, but the 4 greatest witch and wizard of all of the age, the 4 schoolhouses, are named after them. Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rona Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. They built this castle together, far from prying Muggle eyes, for it was an age when magic was feared by common people, and witch and wizards suffer much persecution. He paused, gazed sparely around the room, and continued. For a few years, the founder worked in harmony together, seeking out youngsters who show sign of magic and bringing them up to the castle to be educated. But then, disagreements sprang up between them. A rift began to grow between Slytherin and the other. Slytherin wished to be more selective about the student admitted to Hogwarts. He believed magical learning should be kept within all magic families. He disliked taking a student off Muggle parentage, believing them to be untrustworthy. After a while, there was a serious argument on the subject between Slytherin and Gryffindor, and Slytherin left the school. Professor Ben paused again, pursing lip, looking like a wriggle old tortoise. Reliable historical sources tell us this much, he said, but these honest facts have been assured to be fanciful legend of the Chamber of Secret. This The story goes that Slytherin had built a hidden chamber in the castle, of which the other founder knew nothing. Slytherin, according to legends, sealed the Chamber of Secrets so that none would be able to open it until his own true heir arrived at school. The heir alone would be able to unseal and purge the school of all who were unworthy to study magic. There was a silence. He's finished telling the story, but it wasn't the usual sleepy silence that filled Professor Bin's classes. There were uneasy airs as everyone continued to watch him, hoping for more. Professor Bin looked faintly annoyed. The whole thing is rank nonsense, of course, he said. Naturally, the school has been searched for evidence of such a chamber many times, but the most learned witch and wizard, it does not exist. A tale told to frighten the gullible. Hermione hand was back in the air. Sir, what exactly do you mean by the horror within the chamber? That is believed to be some sort of monster which the hair of Slytherin alone can control, said Professor Bin in his dry, reedy voice. The class changed a nervous look. I tell you, the thing does not exist, said Professor Bin, shuffling his note. There's no chamber and no monster. But, sir, said Seamus Fidgeon, if the chamber can only be opened by Slytherin true hair, no one else would be able to find it with them. What the nonsense, oh Flaherty, said Professor Bin in an agitated tone. If a long succession of Hogwarts headmaster and headmistress haven't found the thing, but Professor, piped up Poverty Pidle, you'll probably have to use dark magic to open it. Just because a wizard doesn't use dark magic doesn't mean he can't, Miss Pennyfeather, snapped Professor Bin. I repeat, if the like of Dumbledore, but maybe you have got to be related to Slytherin, so Dumbledore couldn't begin to eat Thomas, but Professor Bin had had enough. That will do, he said sharply. It is a myth. It does not exist. This is a shred of evidence that Slytherin ever built so much of a secret broom cupboard. I regret telling you such a foolish story. We'll return, if you please, to history, a solid, believable, verifiable fact. And within 5 minutes, the class had sunk back into its usual torpor. I always knew Salazar Slytherin was a twisted old loony, Ron told Harry and Hermione as they thought their way through to the teeming corridor at the end of the lesson to drop off the back before dinner. But I never knew he started all this pure blood stuff. I wouldn't be in his house if you paid me, honestly. If the sorting had tried to put me in Slytherin, I've got the train straight back home. Hermione nodded fervently, but Harry didn't say anything. His stomach just stopped unpleasantly. Harry had never told Ron and Hermione that the Sorting Hat had seriously considered putting him in Slytherin. He could remember as though it was yesterday the small voice that had spoken in his ear when he placed his hat on his head a year before. You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin would have helped you on the way to greatness. No doubt about that. But Harry, who had already heard of Slytherin House reputation for turning out dark wizard, and thought desperately, not Slytherin, and the hat had said, oh well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor. As they were shutting along the throng, Colin Gravy went past. Hey, y'all, Harry. Hello, Colin, said Harry almost automatically. Harry, a boy in my class had been saying But Colin was so small he couldn't fight against the tide of people bearing him toward the great hall. They heard him squeak, see you, Harry, and he was gone. What's a boy in his class saying about you? Hermione wondered. That I'm a Slytherin hair, I expect. Said Harry, his stomach dropping another inch or so. He suddenly remembered the way Justin Filch had run away from him at lunchtime. People here will believe anything, said Ron in disgusted. The crowd then were able to climb the next staircase with difficulty. Do you really think there's a chamber of secrets? Ron asked Hermione. I don't know, she said, frowning. Dumbledore couldn't cure Mrs. Norris, and that made me think of whatever attacker might not be, well, human. As she spoke, they turned a corner and found themselves at the end of the very corridor where the attack had been. They stopped and looked. The scenes were just as it had been that night, except that there was no stiff cat hanging from a torch bracket, and an empty chair stood against the wall bearing the message, "The chamber has been opened." "That's where Filch had been keeping guard," Ron muttered. They looked at each other. The corridor was deserted. "Can't hurt to have a poke around," said Harry, dropping his bag and getting his hand on his knees so that he could crawl along, searching for clue. "Scorched mark," he said. "Here and here. Come look at this," said Hermione. "This is funny." Harry got up and crossed the window to the next message on the wall. Hermione was pointing at the tip of his pane where around 20 spiders were clutching, apparently fighting to get through a small crack in the glass. A long silvery thread was dangling a rope. As they had just all climbed there, Harry had to get outside. "Have you ever seen Spider act like that?" said Hermione, wondering. "No," said Harry. "Have you, Ron?" "Ron?" He looked over his shoulder. Ron was standing well back and seemed to be fighting the impulse to run. "What's up?" said Harry. "I don't like spiders," said Ron tensely. "I never knew that," said Hermione, looking at Ron in surprise. "You have used spider potion loads of time." "I don't mind them dead," said Ron, who was carefully looking inward but at the window. "I just don't like the way they move," Hermione giggled. "It's not funny," said Ron fiercely. "If you must know, when I was 3, Fred turned my teddy bear into a dirty great spider because he broke his toy broomstick. You won't like them either if you have been holding your bear and suddenly it turned into many legs and—" He broke off, shuddering. Hermione was obviously still trying not to laugh. Feeling they had better get on the subject, Harry said, "Remember all that water on the floor? Where did that come from? Someone mop it up." "It was about here," said Ron, recovering himself to walk with pace past Filch, chin pointing, level with his door. He reached for the brass doorknob, but suddenly withdrew his hand as though he had been burned. "What's the matter?" said Harry. "Can't go in there," said Ron gruffly. "That's a girl toilet." "Oh, Ron, there won't be anyone in there," said Hermione, sitting up and coming over. "That's the Moaning Myrtle place. Come on, let's have a look." And ignoring the large out-of-order sign, she opened the door. It was the gloomiest, most depressing bathroom Harry had ever seen it set foot in. Under large cracks and spotted mirror were a row of chipped stone sink. The floor was damp and reflected the dual light given off to bestow a few candles, burning low in their holders. The wooden door to the cubicle were flaking and scratched, and one of them were dangling off its hinge. Hermione put her finger to her lips, set off toward the end of the cubicle. When she reached it, she said, "Hello, Myrtle. How are you?" Harry and Ron went to look. Moaning Myrtle was floating on the surface of a toilet, picking a spot on her chin. "This is a girl bathroom," she said, eyeing Ron and Harry suspiciously. "They're not girls." "No," Hermione agreed. "I just want to show them how nice is it in here." She waved vacantly at the dirty old mirror and came forward. "Ask her if she saw anything," Harry mouthed at Hermione. "What are you whispering?" said Myrtle, staring at him. "Nothing," said Harry quickly. "We wanted to ask." "I wish people would stop talking behind my back," said Myrtle, and her voice choked with tears. "I do have feelings, even if I am dead." "Myrtle, no one wanted to upset you," said Hermione. "Harry, only no one wanted to upset me. That's a good one," howled Myrtle. "My life was nothing but misery at this place, and now people come along ruining my death. We wanted to ask if you've seen anything funny lately," said Hermione quickly, "because a cat was attacked right outside your front door on Halloween." "Did you see anyone near here that night?" said Harry. "I wasn't paying much attention," said Myrtle dramatically. "Peeve upset me so much I came here, and I tried to kill myself. Then, of course, I remembered that I'm already dead," said Ron helpfully. Myrtle gave a tragic sob, rose up in the air, turned over and dived head first in the toilet, splashing water all over them, vanishing from sight. From the direction of her muffled sob, she had came to rest somewhere in the U-bend. Harry and Ron stood with their mouth open, but Hermione shrugged wearily and said, Honestly, that was almost cheerful for Myrtle. Come on, let's go. Harry had barely closed the door and Myrtle gurgling sobbed when a loud voice made all three of them jump. Run! Percy Weasley stopped dead at the head of the stair, perfect batch agleam, an expression of a complete shock on his face. That's a girl bathroom, he gasped. What were you? I just having a look around. Ron shrugged. Clues, you know. Percy swelled in a manner that reminded Harry firstly of Mrs. Weasley. Get away from there, he said, striding toward the and started driving them along, flapping his arm. Don't you care what this looked like? Come back here while everyone at dinner. Why shouldn't we be here? Said Ron haughtily, stopping short and glaring at Percy. Listen, we never laid a finger on that cat. That's what I told Ginny, said Percy fiercely. But she still seemed to think you were going to be expelled. I've never seen her so upset, crying her out. You might think of her all the first year thoroughly overexcited by this business. You don't care about Ginny, said Ron, whose ears were reddening out. You're just worried I'm going to mess up your chance of being head boy. 5 points for Gryffindor, Percy said tersely, fingering his perfect badge. I hope it's teaching you a lesson. No more detective work. I'll write to Mom. It was strode off the back of his neck, as red as Ron's ears. Harry, Ron, and Hermione chose seat as far away possible from Percy in the common room that night. Ron was still in a very bad temper and kept blotting his homework when he reached absolutely swamped to remove the smudge, and it agitated the parchment, fumbling almost of such as much as his homework. Ron slammed the stern book of spell grade 2 shut. To Harry's surprise, Hermione followed suit. Who could it be, though? She said in a quiet voice, as though continuing a conversation they had just been having. Who'd want all the squib and muggleborn out of Hogwarts? Let's think, said Ron in mock puzzlement. Who do we know? We'd think muggleborn or scum. He looked at Hermione. Hermione looked back on convenience. If you're talking about Malfoy, of course I am, said Ron. You heard it. You'll be next, Mudblood. Come on. You've only got to look at his full rat face to know it's him. The Malfoy, the heir of Slytherin, said Hermione skeptically. Look at his family, said Harry, closing his book too. The whole lot of them have been in Slytherin. He's always boasting about it. They could easily be Slytherin destined. His father, definitely evil enough. They could have had the key to the Chamber of Secret for centuries, said Ron, handing it down father to son. Well, said Hermione confidently, I suppose it's possible. But how do we prove it? Said Harry darkly. There might be a way, said Hermione slowly. Dropping her voice still further with a quick glance across the room at Percy. Of course it would be difficult and dangerous, very dangerous. We'll be breaking about 50 school rules, I expect. If in a month or so you feel like explaining, you'll let us know, won't you? Said Ron irritably. All right, said Hermione coldly. What we'll need to do is get inside the Slytherin common room and ask Malfoy a few questions about him realizing it's us. Without him realizing it's us. Now that's possible, Harry said as Ron laughed. No, it's not, said Hermione. All we need would be some polyjuice potion. What's that? Said Ron and Harry together. Snape mentioned it in class a few weeks ago. Do you think we've got nothing better to do in potion than listening to Snape? Muttered Ron. It transformed you into somebody else. You think about it. We could change into 3 of the Slytherin. No one would know it was us. Malfoy would probably telling us anything. He is probably boasting about it in the Slytherin common room right now. If only we could hear him. The polyjuice stuff sounded a bit dodgy to me, said Ron, frowning. What if we were stuck looking like 3 of a Slytherin forever? It'd wear off after a while, said Hermione, waving her hand impatiently. But getting hold of the recipe will be very difficult. Snape said it was in a book called Moisty Potion, Pointy Potion, and it's bound to be in his restricted section of the library. There was only one to get out of book. There was only one way to get out of book from the restricted section. You need a signed note of permission from the teacher. Hard to see why we would want a book, really, said Ron. If we weren't going to try and make one of the potion. I think, said Hermione, that we made it sound as though we were just interested in the theory. We might stand a chance. Oh, come on, no teacher gonna fall for that, said Ron. There'd have to be really thick.